Hello and welcome to Unleashed. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex. You can visit us at umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm excited to be here today with Nate Kievman, who runs a firm, Linked Strategies, and I'll let him tell us what he does. Nate, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you start by giving us an overview of the services your firm offers?
For sure. So, Link Strategies is a executive meeting setting company. We've been in business since 2010. Started off as a LinkedIn marketing firm and evolved over the years into a full digital agency, and then converted into what we would call a direct response company. Our aim is to help create better relationships for our clients with their ideal buyers.
And what type of clients do you serve?
So we work with companies from one-person consulting shops all the way up to companies like BlackRock and NASDAQ and other bigs in the large enterprise space. But typically, what we're doing is serving. I'd say 80% of our clients are, consulting, enterprise software, IT service firms, B2B companies selling higher ticket items that are between 3 to 15 million, give or take. And the typical challenge they're looking to solve for is that they've been a referral-based or network-based sales organization, and they're looking for something to help them scale beyond that limitation, meaning that they've kind of hit their capacity limit, or they know that they're wanting to diversify one or the other.
Okay. So I imagine that as companies get to a certain scale, they will begin bringing this in-house and hiring, a whole batch of sales development representatives and a head of sales and so forth. But when a company is a bit beyond the stage of just inbound referrals, but they maybe don't have the scale to hire their whole team, it sounds like that's where you play.
It is, yeah. I mean, like I said, we work with some of the big companies, and what they're typically doing is bringing us into to build out like a large account enterprise meeting setting part of their business. So they want to go secure more of their largest deals that they've always they've had a couple wins at. They'd like to expand that, and so that's where we're being brought in those spaces. So in whether it's small or big companies, it's building a new vertical or new vehicle to getting executive meetings consistently.
Okay. Before we dive into your firm in particular, give me a little bit of an overview of your broader set or categories of competitors in your space, or not necessarily just competitors, but I'd love to understand your view of the kind of categories of players in this appointment setting or lead generation space. My sense is that you're playing kind of at the top of that sort of pyramid of but there's like this whole range. Every day I get spammed with multiple people saying, "Oh, we can generate leads for you." So maybe walk me through the different categories of the firm, starting at the the kind of the maybe the most spammy, or if you would,
Yeah.
because I get these every day, right? Multiple ones, and maybe just describe what those different firms actually do in practice. And I don't know if there's like one or two or three or four categories in your view of the world.
Yeah, it's a very non-consolidated space for a variety of reasons. But many years ago there was a book that came out uh, called Predictable Revenue, and this book was written by a VP of sales in Salesforce who said, "Hey, you know what, world, you can go." Pick up these tools, these scraper tools, find the data, and start emailing people, and you can, get a whole bunch of junior kids out of school and build this kind of pound sand model and go to town and grow your business. And he's like, "This is what we did with Salesforce, right?" And then the world took over, took it off, and that there's been hundreds of companies that were built after this. This technology, right, which is scraping technology, and data companies that have evolved since then. And then in the PE world, for example, took over and took the model and said, "Okay, let's apply this to everything." Now, I read that book and I thought, this is insanity, right? because I'm not like every lead gen firm. We don't even consider ourselves a lead generation firm. What we do, and the difference here is that our specialty is in executive access, right? How do you get Elon Musk and Tim Cook to respond to an email, right? And why would they respond to a 13 or 15 paragraph email? That's what we do. So when you think about this market, there's a lot of players. And I'm giving you a little backstory because it's important. So if you think about this book that came out, well, what was Salesforce? Who are they selling to? They're selling to directors and or small firms and big firms, but typically the people who are overseeing the CRM tech for the sales division, right? Or the sales CRM. And they're a sales tech stack. It was a low ticket, low purchase price, low level decision. Maybe the seniors would get involved in the decision there as at the end, but they weren't the entry point. And so can you get into the directors in the mid-market and the lower tier access points with that approach? Sure, absolutely you can. And that was their product, and that was what they were built on, and it wasn't a very expensive product at the time. It is now. There's more, for the enterprise space, it's a little different today. And so what happened is this technology took off, and everybody that was in marketing that was promising some kind of lead gen, whether it was through SEO or an agency or a call center or whatever, all of these different industries and verticals in the, that played around lead gen in some way, shape, or form, started to take on this technology and these data sets and said, hey, we can do this for you, right? And there was very low barrier to entry. So anybody could just up and start up, and they can still do it today to some degree. You can go find a tech, right? There's tools out there like Outreach and Quick Mail and a bunch of others that are email outbound technologies, right? They're different from a Marketo or an Eloqua or Keep, which is the old Infusionsoft, those CRMs there, because they allow you to plug in and use your Gmail and your Outlook. And so there's these tools out there, and then there's a bunch of data sources that started to evolve over time, most of which got gobbled up by ZoomInfo. And in the process of doing that, some survived, some didn't. And there's continues to be smaller ones that grow, and then they'll get gobbled up by a bigger data provider and wrapped up to either eliminate competition or to for whatever reason. And so for all intents and purposes, like a head of sales or a team could say, okay, well, I can send an email and I can write a copy and I can get and if I can use these tools, I'm good to go. And there's a lot of firms that run off of that today. There's a lot of firms that do that. There's a lot of services that leverage these resources, and then and we'll call them solo shops that have a small team in the Philippines or in India, and they're managing your data, they're managing your campaigns, and they're promising the world for 2 to 5K a month or something like that. Now that's kind of like the backstory, and then you have call centers that say they do the same thing. Now you have agencies that say they do the same thing, marketing firms that say they do the same thing, and they all have somebody in there that does that stuff, right? Oh, we check that box. And so the ploy is for firms to buy into the concept that that's enough. The complexity that's evolved over the past many years, particularly in this year, earlier in 2022, is that deliverability and spam has gone to an all-time high. You could probably understand that, right? Well, you're already saying I get spammed by this stuff all day, every day. And it's still noisy, but what we have to remember is email's always been noisy, and it's always been noisy for executives. And so the barriers to entry haven't really been there. But what's happened and what's interesting is in the middle of last year, I'm not going to get into too much detail about it, but Google and Microsoft rather, both rolled out what we would consider like an AI spam detection technology of some sort. And email deliverability just went through the floor, and it stopped everybody in their tracks. And it's affecting most companies. They don't even know it, like certain back-end ads to the websites that Google required for deliverability. I had friends telling me, hey, do you know what's going on here? I can't even get my own emails if I send it to myself, right? It's been really interesting to watch. And so what we're seeing is a pushback from the industry saying, hey, enough is enough, no more spam. And then you have the blacklist companies that build fake profiles for those scrapers. And if you use the cheap data, it becomes really risky to your brand. And so all of this stuff is happening right now and is dynamic. And over the years, we've evolved and we've built over 200 QA steps to ensure deliverability and brand protection and the things like that, where most of the entry level organizations are literally it's a guy with a couple of interns or that he picked up from Upwork out of the Philippines, and they're managing your data, probably illegally, probably breaking some kind of laws, and usually putting you at risk of significant fines, and you don't even know it, nor do they.
All right. So let's start with like the lower end firms. So you say that you don't consider yourself a lead generation firm. Let's take the lower end firms, the ones that are spamming me. They'll, every day I'll get some like, hey, would you be interested in more appointments with, executives who will help, set those up for you. What are they probably doing in practice? Like, what is the actual service that they do?
They promise leads. They probably don't guarantee anything. They probably are sophisticated enough to maybe get you a few, but here's the three things that you need to pay attention to. One, what's the source of their data, right? Low quality data sources are plentiful. Scraping tools would be part of that, or there's providers that use scraping tools and they just aggregate it. Why does it matter to you? Poor quality data used on your behalf by an outbound provider like these cheaper guys, it can cost you in a handful of ways. One, brand damage. Two, your internal company deliverability rate will go down, right? Your external marketing deliverability rate on your own will go down. You'll probably end up on a handful of blacklists, which will cause those two things. And then you're at risk for lawsuits, compliance violations, and huge fines. All right, so that's number one. That's on the data side. The second side of it is the copy. Are they actually able to, how are they going to market? Are they going to market? So a lot of these guys, what they'll do is they'll use a good looking woman, and they'll send from their account, and they'll make sure pictures are involved. And I had one that emailed me, I get these, by the way, all the time. Well, so I already know that they don't know how to validate their data if I'm getting it, right? Because we're in their competitive range. So, but I do get them, and I look at these like every week. I have a file that I put everything into, and I look at them, and I see what's coming through. And one of them sent one through, and they're actually asking me if I'd take a meeting for $150. I was like, "Are you serious?" And so I actually emailed them back because now I'm curious on what kind of scam is this one. And they were actually trying to just buy meetings, and their client was paying them a little bit more, and they were playing the arbitrage game, right? And so they probably were a performance-based company, and they figured that if somebody said yes to it, and they took the meeting, then they'd get $500 for their $150 that they paid me, right? Which is crazy because there's no actual interest there. And so there's all kinds of things that you got to watch out for, and that centers around the copy. Like, do you approve the copy? Does that copy protect your brand? Does it put your personal and business company at risk? Those sorts of things. So those two things are really important. And the third thing is the technology that's being used. And they can really only use a handful of technologies. Those technologies are at high risk for blacklisting if you use them. Outreach, quick mail, a bunch of other tools out there. They're good. I mean, and they can be used in short blasts. But if you use them for significant campaigns or long-term campaigns, to anything like that, then the risk of you ending up in a blacklist by using those platforms is pretty high at this point.
All right. Now let's talk about your firm. Okay. Walk me through your services. Maybe you want to kind of narrate a sample engagement with the client. How do you start? Strategy, writing the copy, figuring out the avatar or the target client. Just walk me through the whole process.
Sure. So, our model is built on a concept we call the 5 psychological triggers. And these are getting into the psychology of the executive office, whatever that target might be. Now, sometimes the executives are VPs and directors, but most of the time it's, companies are trying to engage the C-suite. So in working with us, what we're going to help you understand is that we're going to help bring in the highest quality data. Right? We spend we spend $500,000 to $1 million a year on data, depending on which clients we're working with any given year. And then we will leverage that data in a reseller relationship with these high quality vetted data providers, right? Multiple sources. And then we clean that data anyway, even though it's from a high quality source, and we have a whole technology stack behind the scenes. And our tech stack behind the scenes is cleaning your data, it's validating the data, it's spot checking the data, and it's ensuring that we're not going to end up blacklisting, getting anybody on a blacklist. That all happens right up front before we run campaigns. Then we write our copy, and our copy is built on a combination of things: client interviews, deep dive client briefings by you, and 12 years of experience writing for companies like BlackRock down to single person consulting firms that want to engage the BlackRocks of the world, right? So we have a vast amount of experience in that space, writing the copy built on these 5 psychological triggers.
What are the triggers?
And the 5 psychological triggers are trust and credibility, which is what all marketing has to have just to gain some attention. But for executives, that's not enough, right? So for executives, trust and credibility are a given. Like, you got to have them, but if you don't have them, you're not going to get through. And then the 3 things that create interesting to I'm now interested in actually meeting with you is time, money, and risk. And how we write about time, money, and risk is what our genius is in. And then we combine that 5 psychological triggers with a thing called the executive buying arc. And the executive buying arc is the process of decision making by executives, which is insights, implications, and options. So we combine all of that into anywhere from a 10 to a 15 paragraph text only email. And then we have a whole format that we've built proprietary to our model that goes to market. And then we have about 5 variations of that we'll test till we find the one that works for that particular target market. So once we have the data and we have the copy, we need to set up the right email stack, right? Or the go-to-market model. And we combine email and calling, right? And what we first do is we build custom email servers per client, right? So to protect you, you need to own the email server. The email server needs to be controlled. It can't be shared with 1,000 other users. There's a whole bunch of things that have to be in play, right? And so for every campaign we run, so a lot of our clients run multiple campaigns, we build a custom email server for each campaign, protect them, isolate them.
What does that even mean exactly, a custom email server? I mean, I'm assuming it's not like a physical server. This is some kind of virtualized server, but like a lot of people use G Suite or Outlook. Like, what does that mean to have a custom email server?
So part of deliverability is when you, like, let's say you have a G Suite account, right? And when you write your email and you send it out, it's filtered on the way out and it's filtered on the way in, right? To the other Gmail or Outlook receiver, right? So what happens is you have 2 points of failure that you can be spam filtered. So by us building your own G Suite, effectively we're building you your own email server, which is what G Suite is, right? Then we skip the first one, so the first filter. So what we found is that we have about 65% better deliverability than a traditional G Suite campaign would, or an Outlook campaign would, right? Or Microsoft.
So you are not using G Suite. You're like actually kind of building an email
client for you.
Yeah. Email client that's just just an email client that's not G Suite. It's its own kind of email sender. And then I think you said before that you're not using your own domain, but some variation of it.
Yeah, so we'll protect your brand through we're using an alternate domain there's over 200 little QA steps that we have behind the scenes on the technology piece, like how your email is set up, the DKIM, all the different technologies and settings that have to be in place have been checked off, right? That ensure high deliverability. And then we do a whole warm up process where we build the credibility of the server, and which is effectively running it for hundreds of emails a day into and out of it for a week or two, just to build it up, and what we call warming up a domain. And then and a handful of other technical pieces that we do to ensure deliverability. So while you're writing your copy and getting your data set up, that's all happening in the background. And then we're running, once we have that all dialed in, then we run it out to market.
Oh, when you're doing that warm-up process, are you sending those to like email accounts that you own or something, so that, or who are you sending those to when you warm it up?
We have a whole automated system that we built, part of our tech stack.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're building this email server, and then you start sending the emails out. Tell me about that. You send, let's say that someone goes with, I think you have an email only option, or you also offer the email plus calling. Just let's talk about email only first. Do you typically just send just one email, or do you find that you need to hit someone, half a dozen times? How often would you follow up? Talk to me about sort of that sequencing.
Everybody's slightly different, but we'll typically run anywhere from the fewest to 3 sequences of emails to 11, depending on the industry and the target. That's something that's kind of co-decided upon with the client along the way. 3 is the fewest, because most of our engagement will come in the first 3 emails. But we also know that we get quite a bit of a trickle effect from emails, like 4 through 7, for example. And then, going longer just requires more spacing, right? And, being cognizant that we are trying to build a relationship between our executive and you, and, like, for example, you will, and the target market. So we want to make sure that we're building a good relationship between you and them, right? That's really important. And we're invisible in this process, so we're building your brand to market, and this is effectively you going to market. And so in making that happen and taking you to them, we're facilitating this relationship. So the tone of the message, how often we send the message, the feel of the email itself, along with the wording, is all important, and that's all taken into consideration. So when we go out to market, we're going to split test it. We're going to create 27 variations of your email, and then we're going to go to market with those randomizing.
When do you find you get the most engagement? Is it sometimes maybe not necessarily on the first email, but on the second or third after people have seen it once? Or I'm curious about, how that looks over, if you were going to send 5 or 7, what's the percentage response rate look like on each one? Like when do people finally respond?
They respond on every email, but most of them on the second.
Is that right?
Yeah, the majority is by 2 times the second, and then the rest are kind of, if you had a 1% response rate on every email, 1 would be the first, 2 to 3 would be the second, and then 1 for the rest.
Oh, no kidding. So it's like the first time they kind of ignore it, but maybe they're thinking about it. And then the second time it's like, oh yeah, okay, I did want to respond to this person. I'm glad they followed up.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a whole, we have a lot of different models for writing copy. But typically our second email always follows the same model, which is a reminder of the first. And it's usually because executives are psychologically, they might have liked it and been intrigued, but they got busy and something pulled them away. And that was a nice, polite reminder that, hey, I'm still here.
How might that one be worded?
Just it's very, like, a 1 sentence following up with you, Will, like, hey, Will, Nate here, following up to see if you got my original email. Copied it below in case you missed it.
Okay. And are those usually like a reply to the first one? Like a reply all? Okay. Talk to me about subject lines. What are the different maybe categories of subject lines that you like? Maybe give me some examples of subject lines that you find work.
for most of our history, we've done pretty simple introduction, quick question, simple lines like that, right?
Mhm.
Really something that would not say no, but be intriguing enough that curiosity is going to get the best of you. And those will float between 25 to 40%, 50% open rates. I'm testing a couple of new ones now that are more question oriented. I have one campaign running at an 80% open rate. So I'll tell you more as I continue to test.
Mm. Yeah, if I get those that are like quick question, those almost automatically I send to spam. But maybe other people are different than me. That always feels like
I think they've been yeah, but introduction's one that's an all-time great. You never send introduction to spam. You just don't know, so you open it to look, right?
hmm,
But there's a bunch that there's others. There's ways of testing, and I think actually, part of marketing is interesting is that whatever works today is not going to probably work forever, and probably not going to work within the next year. Because if it is working, it's going to get copied, which it is, because that's all over the market now, and so people are watching each other and they're looking for new ideas.
can you give me a sense of without revealing your secret sauce, some of the kind of classic archetypes or of the copy itself? Like what would the email look like? How long is it? How many lines? What sort of the typical, maybe, I don't know if you have 3 or 4 categories that you like, depending on the client.
We do story copy, we have direct copy, we have appropriate person copy, we have what other styles? High level executive copy. The structures all vary quite significantly. Historically, we'll not run short copy, but sometimes our clients really, really, really insist. So we'll split test it, and it never wins, but we always do. Um, we have historically will range between I'd say 5 paragraphs is the shortest copy we'll write typically. To our longest will be 15 to 20 paragraphs.
That
And
long. Holy cow. I am surprised. I thought you were going to tell me that these should be just short, a
nope.
few sentences.
Look, the thing that's counterintuitive is that all executives, even if they're directors or VPs of bigger companies, most of us in life right now, time is our most valuable asset. There's just only so much of it, right? And if you have the wherewithal to get someone's attention, then give them the respect of giving them enough insight to make a decision about meeting with you at the same time. That's my philosophy about it. So we train our copywriters to unlearn whatever you've learned, and then follow our model. And we got Elon Musk responded to a 13 paragraph text only email. Tim Cook responded to a 15 paragraph text only email. Different clients of ours to engage and open the dialogue, and that only happens first by getting in their inbox with all the things I told you with the technology and approach, and then 2 to have copy that's compelling enough to engage them, and 3 to understand the psychology behind why they would even respond, right?
Mm.
So that's the philosophy that we take, and it's not rocket science here. Well, but it does take sophistication, experience, and knowledge to get there, and you have to be willing. And this is one of the primary reasons that companies fail at outbound strategies like this, is because they come into a campaign, they hear from one of those cheap spammy guys that emailed them, and they wanted to take a couple calls to say they qualified the opportunity. And then those guys said, I'll do it on performance, or I'll do it on a 3-month contract, or a month to month, right? Now, by setting up your model that way, you've already committed to failing. And what I mean by that is that if you don't invest into your partner for a year, and trust that they're sophisticated enough on the copy side to crack what's called the messaging code, right? Like the message to market match that you're trying to achieve. That process done right can take anywhere from, if you're lucky, a month, but typically 3 to 6 months. And then from there, you need to figure out how to handle outbound type leads, because the companies probably haven't ever done that before. It's not like a referral. It's not like anything else. So you need to understand how to build rapport appropriately and how to do those things. And part of what we do is train how to take the first call to convert them from cold to qualified. And it's, 12 years of doing this, we've seen some of the biggest companies in the world took over 12,000 meetings from our campaigns over many years and converted very few of them because they would not listen on the sales conversion side. Huge pipeline, huge nurturing opportunity for them, but that's not really what companies are after. You're not after leads, you're not after meetings, you're after deals that close. That's what everybody's after. So the reason that we don't consider ourselves a lead generator is because we're really a growth partner. We don't want you just to get a lead and then figure out how to schedule it, because you'll miss schedule or not schedule most of those leads. We don't want to just give you a meeting, right? Because if we just gave you a meeting, you probably say, hey, that's great. And then at the end of it say, you know what, they just weren't as qualified as I was looking for, right? What you have to understand is that cold outbound strategies are built for three things. They're built for short-term, mid-term, and long-term pipeline development. Now, if you think in year one, you're going to make some 10,000% return, your deal size better be really high, right? Because otherwise you're probably not going to. What you have to look at is your first year of investment into this as a break even to maybe double or triple your money, right? Because you're not going to start closing deals. Whatever your sales cycle is, add that to the time it takes to optimize for the meeting scheduling. And that's effectively when you're going to start getting an ROI. We have clients that have ROI in the first 3 months. That's happened. We just had a lady who's in the publishing space close her first lead for $180,000. And she closed her third lead for another $180,000. She made ROI on her first 3 meetings, right? So it's like, okay, that happens, but it's not something that's typical. What's more typical is you have a 3 to 6 month sales cycle. You start getting meetings around the first to third month in some decent quantity, and that your sales cycle is going to then push out to the 7th to 10th month of the campaign, and you'll start to convert those. But what you're doing at the same time is building your future short-term pipeline by doing this the right way. So you have to think of these types of campaigns as a short, mid, and long-term pipeline development. And what most companies do is they get into it as a tactical buy. They say, I'll give it 3 months, and if it doesn't convert in 3 months, then it's a bad deal. Look at the nuances of all the facts in your current business. The likelihood is that doesn't align with the contract you're signing, and those contracts we won't even do. Right? We won't do anything less than a year, because we want real partners that understand how to think about business the right way and are not after a tactical relationship that's been doomed for failure anyway.
What are some of your tips for sales conversion on these cold outreach meetings? So let's say now your firm has been, successful at getting a meeting set up for one of your clients, and they're new to this game. Most of their previous growth has come from warm referrals, personal relationships. So this is kind of the first time now that they're encountering someone who's like, okay, I read your email. I'm, willing to give you 20 minutes. How do you make the best use of those meetings?
Yeah. So our first meetings, we're really particular about what we suggest. And the bottom line of all sales is that you need to find out what their challenge is, if they have it, if they have a challenge, what their goals are, and what the gaps are between their goals and where they're going to get on their own. Like, that's your first thing. Once you know that, then you can assess, is that gap something that I can help solve? And if you can't do that, then you're not going to get a deal, right? That's the bottom line. And so where most people get on and they want to do a show up and throw up model. Get up, and then the client's gonna say, "Oh, tell me about your business," and then the ego in us wants to say, "Oh yeah, sure, let me tell you all about it." But we should never do that, because we can't tell you about what we do until we know what it is that you're looking for, what your challenges are, your goals in a particular area that I might solve, and is there a gap there or not? Because I can easily tell you if that's going to work or not. And the reason that that's important is most of us offer dynamic solutions and something that's probably customizable in some way. And so if we just show up and throw up on them on everything that we do, show up and throw up, meaning that we get on the call and let me give you this demo. Let me just tell you my standard sales pitch. Like, that's just like, I don't know, shooting in the dark. Maybe we win it, maybe we don't, right? Some people are better at that than others. Some of them are really good at casting a compelling future that you know that they don't have, and that does the job. But the bottom line is, if you want to make professional deals and you want to build and establish qualified opportunities, and you're okay with them being now in the near term or the long term, then the thing you have to do is say, happy to do that, but can I ask you a couple questions so I don't waste your time when I answer those questions, and I can talk specific to the things that matter to you. And then we have a dialogue that matters. And there's nothing that prospects like more than talking about themselves. So ask them questions so that we can understand where we can go and guide them. And then you'll know if you have a qualified opportunity or not, and they'll agree with you. All right. So I'm very good at this process. I do a few $1,000,000 a year myself in sales on an average deal size between, 120 to $300,000 a year. And most of our leads come from, in fact, 25% of our leads come from short-term versions of this type of campaign, and 20% of my annual business comes from leads that I generated in the past 1 to 3 years, sometimes 4 years, that we just nurtured. And so if you think about that, 45% of my annual business that we close comes from cold outreach, and the rest is from networking and referrals. And so we don't really do any outside marketing other than that, networking, referrals, and our own campaigns. And so as we look at that concept, as you are trying to convert this type of lead, as they come on, I would just say show up with curiosity. And we provide a whole script and training as part of our solution to help walk people through this process. But the thing that I've found is those that understand how to have a solid business conversation and appropriately just ask politely, well, so what are some of your biggest challenges in this area? What are your goals in this area? Are you going to solve those goals yourself this year? How urgent is that? Right? Like those very basic questions seem very commonsensical, but oftentimes don't get asked. And once you know that, now you can talk about yourself. Now you can tell stories that are relevant to them, instead of just boring them with something that you're guessing, right? We don't ever want to be guessing on a call. And so that's how we start it. There's obviously a lot more to it, Will, but I think from a standpoint of sales, that's one of my greatest gifts and skills, is that ability to have a very candid conversation, learn where you're at, learn where you're going, what's the gap. Hey, you know what, Will? If we do a market analysis, we can go through like a impact session where we can see what kind of impact we can have to help you fill that gap. Is that interesting to you? It actually would be. Have you guys budgeted for it already? Is this urgent to you to solve? Like, what happens if you don't hit those numbers? Right? Those are the kinds of conversations we want to have. And if they have real problems and they have a real gap and they're charged to filling that gap, then they're going to be curious. And now you have a qualified meeting.
Talk to me about the nurturing piece. So some of your clients may be, selling a service where clients either want it right away or they're never going to want it. So they either like, oh yeah, okay, we'll buy now. But some might probably have the answer of like, wow, okay, I'm glad I learned about your service, to one of your clients. This is great. We don't need it right now, but I'm definitely going to keep your, name available in case, we do need it sometime in the next year or something like that. Right. One of these, like, okay, great conversation. What is your advice to your clients on how to then nurture that relationship? Like, how often do you follow up? How do you follow up? You don't want to just ping people every month saying, hey, do you need the service now? Right. But like, hey, just checking in, we spoke in January, is now the time? So how do you nurture those sort of now warm relationships?
Yeah, for each one, I don't recommend like marketing automation for those. I actually recommend sales triggering automation for those. So there's most of the sales tech stacks that exist allow you for future pings and notifications or reminder emails to follow up with something. Now this pretty common. And so our tech stack, we have a pre-write email feature, and we have a notify feature. So we'll do one or the other. My admin team manages that for me. And part of the conversation is guided by the client. So I always ask them, what would be a good follow-up process here for us, to stay in touch and keep a relationship developing. And they'll tell me check in every 3 months or every 6 months. And sometimes they'll say longer, and I'll say, would it be okay if I just checked in a little bit less time, like every 6 months? If they said a year, next year, right? And they'll say, yeah, of course. And so then I just put that in my notes, and my team will schedule that with a ping. And the ping is typically either pre-written or in my notes and actions on some of the background of that particular client. And so what's really important here, and I think nurturing is the unsung hero, because we closed so much business from nurturing campaigns. We're turning our long-term into short-term pipeline. Once you commit to pipeline development, which not all companies do, right? They're very volatile in a lot of companies. But if you can commit to pipeline development and understanding that this is a game of relationships to develop, then the nurturing becomes second nature to you, right? And so one question I like to ask everybody I talk with, Will, is if you had 100 really good friends, and those 100 really good friends, meaning they're friends that really respected you, they thought highly of you, they thought you were intelligent, they would love to work with you somehow if there was an opportunity, and those 100 friends were all ideal buyers of yours, they fit all your target criteria for you as a client, as a customer of yours, and you develop those relationships over the course of this year. And maybe they weren't great friends, but they were close enough acquaintances to where it was a really positive experience. How many of those do you think over a course of 2 or 3 years end up doing business with you if they knew exactly what you did and it fit their model and it solved their challenges, right? That's the kind of question I like to think about, because we're going to know that they fit all your target criteria. The only thing we don't know is, do they have budget right now, right? And is the timing right? So, but they fit everything else that you've outlined in terms of title and geography and industry and size. Those all fit. So the question to you, Will, and to the audience is, out of 100 people, individuals that represented their companies like that, there was an ideal buyer of yours potentially, but you just made friendships and relationships with them. How many ended up hiring you? I get some pretty interesting responses, by the way, but I'd love to know what yours is.
Oh, mine is probably on the neighborhood of 10 or 15 out of 100. Just has
Perfect.
to be the right time and budget and the need and stuff like that.
So all time, right? So no time limit to this, right?
Oh,
Maybe
no
in
time limit. Oh, I mean,
yeah,
longer. I thought you meant over the course of 1 year.
yeah.
Yeah, longer time period would be obviously a higher percentage. I mean, I don't know, 50, 60%, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I think too. But what most people are only focused on is that 15%, right? The first 10 to 15. And it's not wrong when it's a cold relationship that's oftentimes 10 to 15% conversion is not atypical. But what I had this private equity firm that we were talking with, and they made an not astounding, but it was just a nice observation. They said, we don't measure our marketing campaigns in terms of time. We measure them in terms of impact over time, right? And I said, well, what do you mean by that? They said, most people have the mistake of measuring their SEO campaign or their outbound strategy or whatever on a 12-month cycle. I said, but sometimes relationships take longer to develop out of that. And so if you ran a campaign and got me 100 relationships, and over the course of 5 to 10 years, I closed half of them, and my average deal size is $1 million, guess what that's worth to me? $50 million for that small little investment. Do I really care about the time? It's that's where most small businesses get stuck. It's such a short-term time frame that they lose sight of their mid and long-term clients because they're so tactically focused. And that tactical focus crushes the relationship, eliminates the future desire of them wanting to work with you because you're such an ass or too focused on the short term, right? And so the point of this is that build great relationships with your potential buyers, and the rest will take care of itself. And that's what we're really about.
I agree with that. I think you should be, prepare hard for a meeting, but then be indifferent to the immediate result.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a great fit, fantastic. If you're not, tell them someone who is, but focus on the relationship.
Yeah.
Nate, if folks wanted to follow up with you and reach out, learn more about your firm, where would you point them online?
They can reach out to me at our website, linkedstrategies.com, LINKED strategies.com, or there's a form on the website. You can reach out there. You can find me on LinkedIn at Nathan. It's linkedin.com/n/Nathan Kievman. And you're welcome to private message me there, and I'm monitoring that, or my team's monitoring that on the daily. And either of those would be the best place. And you can also email me, natek@linkedstrategies.com.
Fantastic. We will include those links in the show notes. Nate, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks. Well, appreciate the time.